coming in from a perspective of an immigrant family who is pro Second Amendment, um, but yet the fear of immigrants, specifically Muslim immigrants, who fear, who know they have the right to carry arms and know that they're entitled to Second Amendment, but yet fear to do so because of the criminalization that they face. And that laws are applied unfairly at times to our community, and how that has impacted our community who could potentially, I come from a family who survived genocide. And so the traumas of leaving a government who sanctioned genocide on you resonates, and that trauma is forever embedded in us. And then you come to a country where freedom and opportunity is given, and you want to partake, and you know you have these rights, but you're constantly afraid of being recriminalized. And I think, Justin talked about the African American community and the fear of carrying and things of that. And I totally, that resonates with me as a Muslim, as someone who's, father and brother who carry in every day the fear of what if they're pulled over, what if something happens, what if their rights are taken away.
I feel like, and this kind of stems towards a little bit like my background being in the Kurdish community or also the immigrant community, is pushing the safety aspect of it in the midst of these inequities and things like that. And in the midst of, you can't really control people's anxieties and how they react to it, is noting that what safety aspects could be done and could be trained and could be just communicated towards those populations to say, like, if this is the route you decide to go down, how can we ensure that you know how to handle it safely, you know how to like store it safely, and make sure that like we at least minimize as much as possible the violence that could come as a result.
Yeah, and I kind of want to sort of jump off of what both of you were saying. To Michael, I know in the chat earlier you shared about how there can be a barrier to access for gun training, especially for people who are low income. And I think that you threw out an idea about having that subsidized. If you could share a little bit more on that.
Yeah, my only concern around when you start to put a lot of requirements on, being able to exercise, a constitutional right, whether it's the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, or regardless of what it is, you suddenly create some barriers for people. Now, when I wanted to go get my concealed carry permit, I had to do 8 hours of classroom training. I had to go shoot targets, buy ammo, and do all that stuff. Pretty easy for me, right? My job was such that it was pretty easy for me to take off a couple hours early from work and go head over there for a 4-hour trip in the evening. Not so much for everybody else. So, if we're going to go down that path where you're going to require some of these things, I think you in some ways need to start looking at how do you subsidize some of this so that we can have some equity. Elise, I think, very rightly talked about equity earlier, and there are real problems. Most of those problems are because we keep putting new laws in place that make it harder and harder for people, and they always, 100% of the time, affect those who are on the lowest income levels the most, 100% of the time. And in our country, that also ends up hitting a lot of minorities. But primarily, this is about income inequality and income differences. And if you're not going to take both of those on, it's difficult.